Good afternoon, everyone. Bishop Peter, my brother priest, fellow religious, dear jubilarians, what a joy to be able to gather here at St. Elizabeth's here in Milton to celebrate and to thank God for the gift of religious life and the gift of your vocations. A word of thanks to Sister Marian Bathos, who served as delegate for the religious with such grace and energy and has moved on to greener pastures, accepting a leadership role in the Sisters of St. Joseph. But we're so blessed now to have Sister Germana with us, with her vast experience of religious life in the United States and throughout the world. We're also very grateful to the parish here for their hospitality, conscious of so many years of being with Monsignor Helmick and the wonderful people at St. Teresa's, and we are very, very grateful for the parish here, for the hospitality and welcome. Being part of a religious community myself, we have houses in 106 countries. And looking over the 5 centuries of the history of our order, I can see the fits and starts. Sometimes there were countries where we had many, many friars, and then they would practically die out there and start up someplace else. I understand that there's a rhythm in religious life which vacillates between extraordinary growth and precipitous decline. As a young friar, I taught at a university in Spain, Maria Cristina, which was in the royal monastery. The Augustinians have a Catholic university there, but originally it was the Jerónimos monastery, where King Philip II lived as a monk. And they were one of the most powerful religious orders in the world at the time. I looked in Wikipedia to see if they're still around. Well, they have 1 house and 9 members. Today's readings underscore some very important features of religious life. Evangelical poverty, connected to the Church's preferential option for the poor and to the centrality of prayer in a life of discipleship. When we look at religious life in our world today, we see that in some places the charism seems to be receding, in other places it's growing stronger. But what is constant is consecrated life, a vocation to a life of community, living evangelical counsels, poverty, chastity, and obedience, a life of contemplation, apostolic service, education, health care, social justice, and so many other ministries that reflect and promote the teachings of Jesus in the gospel. The witness of consecrated life is the new martyrdom, the sign of Jonah, the witness to the Church's belief in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Your vocation, you share with millions of men and women in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. Today, when we look around the world and see that 65% of the hospitals in developing countries are run by the Catholic Church, most of them founded by religious women. 1/4 of the hospitals in the world, 44,000 secondary schools, 100,000 primary schools, 2,000 universities. The impact of religious life, not just in our church, but on society in the world, has been just enormous. And the impact is not just in the areas of education and healthcare. I had the great joy of working 20 years in Washington with the Hispanic community there, the immigrant community, and there was a community of sisters from Spain who worked very closely with me, the Carmelitas de la Caridad de Vedruna. In fact, when I started the Centro Católico, it was just two of us, myself and Sister Manuela. And when people would ask me, Padre, how many people work at the Centro Católico? I would say 11. I'd say me and a nun who does the work of 10. So she counts as 10. Jesus has a lot to say about the two themes that are in today's readings, which I say are so central in religious life. Evangelical poverty, which is connected to the Church's preferential option for the poor, and to the centrality of prayer in the life of discipleship. Now, Jesus has a lot to say about money in the Gospels, and continuing in that tradition that we see in the Old Testament, Amos today speaking about the evil, the exploitation of the poor. In the Gospels, Jesus singles out the Pharisees as lovers of money. You see, the betrayal of Judas was because of his desire for silver. In the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, the rich man represents that globalization of indifference that Pope Francis speaks to us about. And in the story of the rich young man, Christ tells him there's one thing lacking. You've obeyed the commandments, you've led a good life. Too attached to that money. Give it to the poor. Come and follow me. And the Gospel says he went away sad because he'd been enslaved by his money. In one of the Gospels, Mark, it says, Jesus looked on him with love, and I always thought if he only realized how much God loved him, he would have been free. It would have allowed him to give that money away to the poor and follow Jesus. Zacchaeus, on the other hand, who was such a sinner, gave all of his money away because Jesus called him by name and because he knew that he was loved. The prodigal son is fascinated by wealth, and he makes a life without the Father, without God, and discovers that money does not bring happiness. Gospel poverty is humility, it's freedom, it's trust in providence, it's solidarity with those who suffer, it's interdependence, it's knowing that we are loved. The witness of stewardship given by our religious is so important in a world that is so materialistic and so individualistic. Your life is an invitation to people to understand our vocation to be stewards of God's gifts, pilgrims on a path to fullness of life in God, with a nostalgia for a place yet unseen and a call to share the gifts that we have received. A very important part of our spirituality as religious is celibacy. In many ways, it's a renunciation like poverty. I often share with people, a couple years ago I had a wedding. Two wonderful young Catholic doctors who wanted to be missionaries. And as I'm getting them ready for the wedding, they just wanted to talk about where they could go and serve as doctors. So I gave them two possibilities. One of our Capuchin missions in Papua New Guinea, and the other in the Chaco in Paraguay. They actually went and visited these places. But after the wedding, they came to me and they said, oh, those places, they need doctors so badly, with no health care whatsoever. And we really wanted to go, but we realized that they have Zika there. And we're going to have children, and we know that would just be too dangerous. And of course, I understood the logic entirely. But my mind immediately went back to my 3 classmates as they left for Papua New Guinea. As they're going out the door, the superior said, well, you're going to get malaria, dengue, leeches, and fleas. Not necessarily in that order. Our celibate priests and religious have had an availability to go and serve in very, very difficult places and to carry the gospel to the ends of the earth and in so many ministries. It has made a huge contribution to the mission of the church and to civilization itself. The second reading today is one that I've always liked, and I associate it with the Russian spiritual book called The Way of the Pilgrim. People in my generation will remember how when J.D. Salinger's book, Franny and Zooey, came out, he talks about the Jesus prayer and sent everybody rushing to read The Way of the Pilgrim to find out what this was about, that beautiful prayer Bartimaeus prayed by the Eastern Rite and Orthodox Christians. Lord Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. But the book, The Way of the Pilgrim, this Russian classic, is about a pilgrim who hears that challenge to pray without ceasing. And he goes on this pilgrimage trying to find out how he can do that. And he talks about hearing a reading from 1 Timothy, the very reading that we listen to in today's Mass. And the pilgrim says, the Apostle Paul says, I exhort you therefore that first of all, supplications be made. The first thing laid down by the Apostle's word about prayer is that the work of prayer comes before everything else. I exalt you therefore, first of all, a Christian is bound to perform many good works, but before all else, what they must do is to pray. For without prayer, there can be no other good work. Without prayer, we cannot find the way to the Lord. Cannot understand his truth. We cannot crucify the flesh with its passions and lusts, and our hearts cannot be enlightened with the light of Christ and be savingly united to God. None of these things can be effected unless they are preceded by constant prayer. Consequently, we must pray always, and attaining to the purity of prayer, which is the mother of all spiritual blessings. Capture the mother, and she will bring you the children, said Saint Isaac the Syrian. Learn to acquire the power of prayer, and you will easily practice all the other virtues, the pilgrim says. Curie of Ars, in his feast day, there's a beautiful reading in the breviary, says in his catechetical lessons, our task is to pray and to love. Love is very difficult, and without prayer, we'll never be able to really do it. Prayer keeps us focused on the one thing that is necessary. As religious, we have a special role as intercessors. When I was growing up as a child, my family, parents and grandparents, brothers and sisters, we would go so often to the Poor Clare Convent, which was not too far from our home. And it's where I said my first Mass. Sisters were thrilled. They'd never had a first Mass in the convent before. And no one in that convent has a cell phone. Only the extern sisters answer the one phone that they do have. Yet those sisters know everything that takes place in our town. They know who lost a baby, whose marriage is on the skids, whose son or daughter has been deployed, in Afghanistan, who's lost a job, who graduated and who didn't, who just found out that their child is gay, who has cancer. Because everybody in the town goes to those sisters and asks for their prayers. After the priesthood dinner the other night, I went to the hospital to visit Father O'Leary. Keep him in your prayers. He wanted to be remembered to everybody. But it was sort of late at night, and I thought, well, I'll get in and out very quickly. Well, every 10 steps, someone else would ask me to go into their room and pray with them and give a blessing to their family. And finally, we get to the door, going out the door, and the man working at the desk comes running after me. He said, "Cardinal, I have a friend up in the 10th floor. Do you have a minute?" You know. On the one hand, I was exhausted and anxious too, because my day had started in Rome many hours before. On the other hand, I was so touched by the faith of our people and humbled by the awareness that my most important task is to pray for God's people and to accompany them in their suffering. I know that as we age, the challenges of ministry become more challenging. I was talking to a sister very briefly before Mass who celebrated 75 years, I think she said, of religious life, and lamenting the fact that she can't get out there and do all the things that she did for so many years and that she loved so much. But as we get older, I'm convinced that our ministry of prayer grows to a much more important service to the church. And it allows us too, as religious, to rediscover our call, our vocation, our witness. Last summer, a group of our young friars were getting ready for their solemn vows, and they wanted me to give them a retreat, a directed retreat. So it was summertime, things were a little slower. I said, well, come on up, you can all stay at the rectory. And so the retreat consisted in doing a close reading of our constitutions. I must say it was such a renewing experience for me. I'm sure I got more out of it than those young brothers did. But it made me so grateful for my vocation. I was professed in 1965, and I should be much holier than I am after over 50 years of religious life. But I'm so grateful for this gift and for the beauty of religious life in our church. And I know that as we come together to celebrate Jubilees, it's an expression of that gratitude and that joy. As I said before, I celebrated my first Mass in the convent of the Poor Clares, and as I was leaving my family, Mother Abbess said, "Brother Seán, all the sisters are going to be praying for you every day." Well, a few years later, when I was named a bishop, I called them up and said, "Stop praying." We Catholics love our religious sisters, not just for what you do and what you have done, which is absolutely incredible, but for the witness and the love that you bring to our church and the world. And so it's with great joy that we gather here to say thank you to God and thank you to all of you. May the Lord continue to bless you and fill your hearts with His love, His light, and His joy. Amen.